100 years ago, bureaucracy meant something positive. It connoted a rational, efficient method of organization, something to take the place of the arbitrary exercise of power by authoritarian regimes. Bureaucracy brought the same logic to government work that the assembly line brought to the factory. With a hierarchical authority and functional specialization, they made possible the efficient undertaking of large, complex tasks. David Osborne.
Today, many Americans have a negative perception of the federal bureaucracy. They see an ever-expanding web of organizations that hinder rather than help progress. However, as entrenched as it may be, the federal bureaucracy has not grown significantly since the 1960s. Most Americans also view the federal bureaucracy as wasteful. Past whistleblowers such as the late Senator William Proxmire of Wisconsin and his Golden Fleece Awards, mock awards for the most wasteful bureaucratic spending, helped fuel this perception. Although many questionable practices have been eliminated since, wasteful spending still undoubtedly occurs. Writing in the first decades of the 20th century, German sociologist Max Weber believed that bureaucracies exist to rationally and efficiently implement the policies of elected government.
The decisive reason for the advance of bureaucratic organization has always been its purely technical superiority over any other kind of organization. The fully developed bureaucratic mechanism compares with other organizations, exactly as does the machine with the non-mechanical modes of organization. Max Weber, 1946.
Weber firmly believed that workers in bureaucracies develop specific expertise and technical knowledge that they couldn't otherwise get in the short tenure of elected policymakers. Continuity from one administration to the next, he felt, was essential for an orderly transfer of power. Modern theorists consider Weber short-sighted and criticize him for overlooking how bureaucracies actually function in government. Bureaucracies, they argue, tend to resist change, which uses resources and introduces unknown elements into the system. By seeking power of its own and using its power to maintain the status quo, a bureaucracy can actually work counter to its purpose, effectively managing change by new administrations. Since it makes little sense to have multiple government organizations performing the same function, the inherent danger of bureaucracies is their monopolistic nature. Without competition or strict regulation, they become inefficient at best and tyrannical at worst. However, some competition does exist. The U.S. Post Office is no longer the only lawful carrier of mail and parcels. But very few organizations have the human and financial resources to pose any real competitive threat. Nearly all of the bureaucracy, the President's cabinet, federal agencies, and governmental corporations, is part of the executive branch of the federal government. Since the Constitution says very little about how the executive branch should be organized, the responsibility for defining the organization and operation of the executive branch fell to the nation's political leaders. The cabinet began to take shape in 1789 with the creation of the Departments of State, Treasury, and War. 12 more have since been added, the newest of which is the Department of Homeland Security. The President is responsible for appointing department heads, all of which are called secretaries, except the Justice Department's Attorney General, and the Senate must confirm them. In addition to the 15 departments, nearly 150 independent agencies, including the CIA, the Federal Reserve, NASA, and the Social Security Administration, report to the White House. Every federal agency is classified as either regulatory or executive, with regulatory agencies watching over specific sectors of the economy or national interest, and executive agencies carrying out national functions and interests that differ from those of the Cabinet. Regulatory agencies, the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, and the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, to name a few, are each governed by a commission of 10 to 15 members who are appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate. Regulatory agencies, empowered by Congress to make rules and regulations to enforce its laws and to enforce punitive procedures when they are broken, function as small governments. However, unlike the federal government, regulatory agencies are not held accountable through elections. In many cases, they aren't even held directly accountable by the President, a situation that has raised serious questions regarding their constitutionality.
The bureaucracy takes itself to be the ultimate purpose of the state. Karl Marx.
Executive agencies that carry out critical national functions not controlled by the Cabinet, the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, and the National Aeronautical and Space Administration, or NASA, for example, are governed by agency heads, appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate. In addition to regulatory and executive agencies, the federal government also manages corporations functioning as businesses. These include the United States Post Office, Tennessee Valley Authority, or TVA, Amtrak, and Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC. In fact, the White House is its own large organization. The Executive Office of the President, consisting of the White House office and other offices and councils that advise the President on matters of policy, namely the National Security Council, or NSC, the Office of Management and Budget, or OMB, and the Council of Economic Advisers, CEA.